Basically, we have established three important things in this debate. First of all is regarding the terms of compensation. So what we mean by compensation is not a compensation is inherently in the shapes of money, but a compensation where the victims of criminal can be recovered. If, for example, they have physical abuse, where they are being seduced by some actors, then they can get free access to psychiatric and trauma healing kinds of mechanism and other kinds of things. If they are physically injured, for example, because they are stabbed by knife, for example, by the criminal, then they can get free access to health facility. Thus, we believe that it leads us to the second important thing, which is in our side, the normal criminal justice system as usual can be still also be conducted. It will not hamper the existing criminal justice system where government is trying to ensure that recidivist criminal is going to get what they deserve to get, ladies and gentlemen, from the first beginning. But moreover, we have also agreed to the extent that why victims deserve to get the compensation in the terms of full compensation for government, because May has told you because they are the taxpayer, for example. That's why from the first beginning they contribute to the establishment of rehabilitation system. That's why from the first beginning rehabilitation system should be progressive, should be success. If there is a kind of failure from the rehabilitation system, then they have been compensated because that kinds of their contribution is failed. But moreover, we think that it is a tangible compensation in contrast to the status quo, where we believe that in status quo there are no any kinds of tangible compensations coming from the government. If, for example, that I am become the victims of murder, then what will going to be jail is the perpetrators, but I'm not going to be able to gain any compensation. So there are no any kinds of guarantee that I can recover from the suffer I get from that kinds of criminal. That's why we want to change the status quo. We believe that there should have been a compensation coming from the government. Government have to ensure that the victims can get any kinds of mechanism in order that they can recover from the suffer they have access from these kinds of victims, from kinds of criminal. But moreover, before I jump into my extension, in which the characteristics of recidivist criminal and why it is inherently the fault of government and why government have to ensure that it is their responsibility to compensate, I will engage to several stages from the opposition. First of all, they say that law in the future and in the past cannot be related to each other. First of all, we believe that it still need to be related to each other. Why? Because law in times, the reason why we say is that law in times are connected to each other, because once you want to recover, once you want to change the criminal behavior of some actors, it needs a long process, ladies and gentlemen. It needs it needs a long process. We believe that it's the kinds of thing that have to ensure that there is a kinds of contingency between one place to one mechanism to the future mechanism. But moreover, even if it is not related to each other, we believe that our side is going to be better, because we believe that the government have to be more responsible to the criminal, so that they are to ensure that these criminals are not doing that kinds of criminal again. If, for example, that this criminal do that things again, we believe that this is the failures of government. I'm going to extend that in my substantive. But moreover, second of all, we believe that in the case of justice and compensation, no matter what kinds of things, no matter in what times, the essence of justice to bring the essence of law to bring the justice should have to be established no matter when. Then precisely this is going to be precisely this is going to be the exclusive thing that can be only happen in our side, that I will explain in my substantive. But moreover, second of all, they say is that the fault that there is a kind of culture where the culture has been socially constructed and it is not the violence of government from the first beginning. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that the reason why this culture has happened, it is not because it has been socially constructed from the first beginning, but the reason is because these kinds of criminal have ever conduct another kinds of criminal. We believe that it is not integrated within their self. For example, that if the very first beginning they see that these kinds of people is a good people, but they do criminal, then we believe that it will be the moment when their kinds of first perception can be achieved again. This is the government's obligation to ensure. But moreover, even if it is socially constructed, we believe that government still responsible to ensure to ensure that there is a mechanism where he can take over any kinds of culture that is internalized by their society. We believe that even if it is social constructed, we believe that it is still wrong for government to just abandon this kinds of thing and saying that this is not the fault of criminal. But moreover, third of all, this says that economical reason is one thing that can make these kinds of criminal happen. But moreover, ladies and gentlemen, they cannot explain why because you conduct some kinds of criminality owing to economical reason, why it can be justified to why the victims can justify that kinds of criminal. We believe that just that no matter what kinds of motive, no matter what kinds of reason, once the victims become the victims, they are still harmed. They still need the same capital to recover. That's we believe that there are no any kinds of connections between the motive of you conducting the crime and whether it can be justified or not. In my extension, I'm going to prove how the criminal of recidivist criminality that conducted by recidivists means the value of government. Under two reasons, we believe that the reason why recidivists commit a crime is owing to be it the external factors and without the motive of external factors. May have established to you how the external factors happen is because there is a kinds of rejections coming from the society. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, this rejection is not limitedly coming from the society to the extent that they can accept it by the society, but also to the extent that they cannot obtain a job from these kinds of initial perspective. Let's say, for example, there's a kinds of policy in one places where corporation, the policy internalized by corporation, where they are not going to accept any kinds of employee coming from the criminal behavior. We believe that this is government's ability to change these kinds of policy because they are the government. But that's why we believe that once this policy is not changed by the government, we believe that this is the government's failure from the very first beginning. Moreover, even if they say that there is already a kinds of rehabilitation system where the government have provided mechanism for these criminal to get educations, to get the skill of social relations, to get any kinds of that things where they can be skillful. For example, we believe that the essence of rehabilitation system is that the government have to ensure that these kinds of skill and these kinds of social construct, once they go out of the jail, it can be implemented by them more or less. That's we believe that the government still have a full control, should still have full responsibility of ensuring that their skill that have been taught by them the moment when they are still in the jail, it can be implemented owing to this kinds of can be implemented. Thus we believe that from the very first beginning, if that is not conducted by the government, we believe there are no means to conduct any kinds of rehabilitation system. But moreover, we believe that this discriminatory behavior is not in the status quo. Discriminatory behavior, why it is still happen, because it is not aggressively attacked by the government. The government hasn't put any kinds of big doesn't take any kinds of big burden and big effort to ensure that it's not going to be happen anymore. We believe that there are lots of mechanisms of government can do this kinds of thing. They can do a massive kinds of sessions and public discourse, for example. They can portray this new individual as a newborn identity, for example. Thus we believe that that moment when the society is eventually cannot still accept this criminal, is become the value of the government. But moreover, we believe that even if we do it without external factors, we believe that we understand there is a kinds of areas which prone to criminality. The government should have understood regarding these kinds of things. We believe that there is a kinds of area with less security and places where full of people that fail in rehabilitation process happen. We believe that this is the government's obligation to ensure that this kinds of area is not exist in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen. Thus we believe that if, for example, one kinds of places still become the area where criminality frequently happen, meanwhile the government has breakthrough record has understood the vulnerability of that kinds of places. Once the criminal still happen in these kinds of places, we believe that it's the fault of government. Motion false.